Hey Hoss, what's going down? Welcome to a Thursday Collection Connection, where we're playing a game that's just an excuse to talk about records. It's a game I play with my brother, Plastic Eric, from the Plastic Soundwave Cult channel, and every Monday he talks about an album. Every Thursday I talk about an album, and the connective tissue is that the album that we talk about has to relate in some way to the album shown in the previous video. Now, we've made a change in the last couple of weeks where instead of telling you what that connection is, we're asking you to try to guess. And even if you don't have an out-and-out guess, we welcome comments, but also feel free to ask questions if you want to get some clues, if you are stumped but want to play along. So with that, let's move ahead. In Eric's last video, he talked about Brotherhood by New Order. I have the CD version of the album that he showed. He showed the cassette that he had from way back when, as well as the album. This was a 2008 remaster that sort of keeps the same cover, but adds this sort of satiny overlay to it. It's still got the metallic sort of underneath, and restores the original artwork to a degree. But that album is interesting in that it has almost as many variations, even in its initial release in covers, as it had variations. There were all different themes you saw on the cassette that he held up. It was a closer sort of diagonal crop of the same material. Each different release, even in the same format, kind of throughout the world, almost seemed like it had different variations of the cover. So that was an odd one. And the original CD in the US, this may be the only place that this happened, is the only place that had like the actual title on the album. But as New Order albums go, I don't tend to listen to New Order albums in their entirety. I tend to pick a favorite, or a couple of favorites, or three favorites, and you will see from my playback stats, which is how I consume basically all my music, not through Spotify, not through putting a thing in the stereo, but through my iTunes library, which I feed around the house, and through my phone and track all those plays and listens. Having an album be entirely in double-digit playback is sort of my benchmark for an album that has been well listened to. And as you can see, Brotherhood doesn't quite make that mark, but it does. It's much more evenly listened to than the average New Order album in my collection. And I should mention that the remaster has some very solid bonus tracks on it. This was also the era of State of the Nation and Touched by the Hand of God, and to a degree, I guess maybe Blue Monday. There's a couple of mixes of Blue Monday on there as bonus tracks anyway. But yeah, even though those bonus tracks are down there in plays, the primary album of Brotherhood is one of the more listened to albums in full that I own in the New Order catalog. So it's a good album. I love Every Little Counts. There was a tape made, and I'm saying this specifically to Eric. I don't remember if it's a tape you made or if it was a tape that I made way back when, but it had Every Little Counts segueing into So Lonely by the Police. And to this day, I hear that segue out of that needle rip at the very end that ends the album, going into the very kind of tight opening of So Lonely. And it was a great transition, but I hear that every time. And now for the album that I am connecting it to. I have decided on the 2009 album by Animal Collective, Merriweather Post Pavilion. Got that crazy optical illusion on the cover there. This was an album named for a performance venue in Columbia, Maryland, just outside of Baltimore, which is fitting because they are a quartet of guys from Baltimore, Maryland. And there are, let me see if I can remember this, Avi Tear, Panda Bear, Deacon and Geologist. So none of them go by their actual names, although their actual names are not like industry secrets or anything. I didn't memorize any of their names, but that's who's in the band. And the album was produced by the band along with Ben H. Allen. So this is the only Animal Collective that I have. It was touted sort of at the time as, very accessible for sort of avant-garde pop band that Animal Collective was. And so I picked it up. I know a lot of people who really love this album. I find it sort of middling. It didn't floor me, and that's why I don't own any other Animal Collective records. This was my first and only Animal Collective record. And certainly I don't find it bad. I find it interesting, but nothing that I'm in love with. And so it comes in this sort of card envelope thing. But even if you want to call that like outer packaging as opposed to the actual cover, so I don't know which one. The internet feels that this is the cover. You could argue that this is the cover, but must have been marketed with a sticker because there's no info on it anywhere. And as far as the music, when I listen to it, it gives me a big sort of West African high life vibe, not unlike Talking Heads with Remain in Light, which we talked about relatively recently. But what it shares with that music style is the repetitiveness, just endlessly repeating loops, and the sort of propulsive polyrhythms, and the joy that sort of comes out of that sound. And yet I think of that music as being very percussive based, and it often when I'm listening to this album, the only real percussion I notice is just the pulse. It feels like oftentimes in the songs it's just a ba 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 ba, and that is basically what makes up the percussion track. So instead, it is sort of a collage of washes of loops of synth and things like that. So it takes inspiration not only from that West African music, but also from psychedelic music and sort of the lo-fi movement, I feel like, of the 90s. And I think part of what bothers me about it is that there's sort of so much going on, even without the percussion, that it all gets a little bit sludgy to me. And the voices aren't necessarily very clear on top of that. Sound-wise, it makes me think a little bit of MGMT, what they were doing at the time. I think especially in the way that they sing. But yeah, bottom line, I don't love it. I think if the songs maybe were shorter, and that's probably what doesn't appeal to me about High Life itself, I'm okay with the repetition. I mentioned that Remain in Light was not necessarily my favorite Talking Heads album, even as revered as that is, and as well loved as this album was. Just didn't sing for me, although it's fine. I would say the songs of My Girls and Summertime Clothes and Brother Sport maybe are the ones where it comes together the best for me, but even then, it feels like it goes on a little too long for me. I feel like even if you were just going to explore a riff over and over, I could get into it if it lasted 3 to 4 minutes, but when it gets into 6 and 7 minutes, I start to get a little tired of it. I'd look for a little variation, and when the vocals are not all that clear, it doesn't even give you a sort of either a narrative or a subject to muse on while they're singing. So I haven't memorized the lyrics. I'm not sure who sings. They all seem to just kind of be guys behind keyboards. And I admit that my research was not super deep here, but for connection purposes, they work very well to connect to New Order's Brotherhood. And so I will leave you the task of trying to suss out the connection between New Order's Brotherhood from 1986, and Animal Collective's Merriweather Post Pavilion from 2009. And you can look for Eric and his connection to this Animal Collective album on Monday on the Plastic Soundwave Cult channel. And with that, that's all I have. So I thank you for watching. Bye-bye.